hello, anyone who's watching this in archive, because no one's here right now. We're Abnormal Mapping. I'm Matthew Marco.
I'm Jackson.
And we're doing Read for Speed Part 3, where Jackson's going to play Burnout Paradise. And
Read for Speed!
I'm going to read the Need for Speed novel, based on the movie, based on the video game by Electronic Arts. And that's going to be done. We've been doing this 2 Sundays in a row. This is the third one. We're going to go through the third quarter of the book, which is where the movie starts, apparently.
Basically.
Because the last two days of reading, almost none of the things that happened were represented in the actual film. This is the first time we've actually seen the movie since we started this nonsense.
Yeah, it's true. We went and saw the film. It's alright. It's dumb. It's not all the dumb you want.
There are moments that are beautiful.
And Imogen Poots is starring in a completely different, a far better film than everyone else.
Yep. I feel like in some moments when he was being particularly manic, Aaron Paul was channeling Michael Keaton better than Michael Keaton did that entire movie.
That's true. I mean, I thought Aaron Paul was terrible, but there were bits where he was so into being dumb, dark, broody man in a level that no one else could commit to.
a little bit more,
yeah,
it would have been great, because he got kind of a manic, like Batman Michael Keaton vibe crossed with like Joel McHale, especially in the hair, and the gravel voice.
The gravel voice. So
if this
gravelly.
had just been Joel McHale starring in Need for Speed, it probably
oh my god, that probably would have been better casting.
Yep. So I don't know. There's that moment where that guy got naked, and I thought that was actually kind of funny.
It was pretty. It's more the fact that they just stick with that bit for so long.
Yeah, that movie just becomes a weird thing for 5 minutes.
Like he starts stripping, you're like, wait, what's he doing? And then about 3 minutes later, you finally realize what he's actually doing. And then he walks out, and then they have another bit in the lift, and they have another bit when he meets his friends. It's ridiculous.
The thing Destiny pointed out was that the book actually makes way more sense about what is going on with character motivation, which is shocking, because Dino Brewster is the most non-character in that movie, despite being supposedly the villain.
I actually really liked how for the first half he played it like we wanted him to for like those.
Yeah, but he never got like greasy enough at the end, though.
No.
Like, he was not villainous, he was just kind of, like, pouty and gross.
Except the thing that he did was ask a bunch of meathead motor guys to murder people. Like, he actually said, why don't you kill these guys? And Michael Keaton was like, yeah! They're gonna hunt these guys, it's gonna be great!
I also appreciate, because it had not shown up in the book yet, that not only is there a Texas Mike, but there's an English Paul.
English Paul! English Paul and Johnny V are my 2 favorite characters.
Yeah, I just imagine Johnny Vignacci. I know you do too.
Yep, we all do.
And then the Gooch was the other reason.
It was one of my they could have gone a really bad way in the... Okay, we have to have...
I could see someone being like, let's just name something after Johnny Vignacci. Maybe they're Giant Bomb fans.
Maybe. There must be... I feel like one of them should have been Razor if they did that. The lack of a Razor Callahan reference. Eating at people.
I know. I like that whole sequence with the cop in the Nebraskan road stop. By the way, that does not look like Nebraska at all.
Also, isn't Nebraska way nearer New York than it is California for halfway of their journey?
It's smack dab in the middle of the country. It's equidistant.
Okay. Alright, that's not too bad. They hit it there. And then I guess they do fly most of the way towards the end.
Yep.
Because he wants to be called Maverick, you see.
Yep. That whole... the thing where he gets an iPad in like military prison
to watch, but like without any kind of like awareness that he's asking for something completely ridiculous, he goes up to the guard and goes, "Can I have an iPad, please?"
The only thing worse than that is the idea that they could both stream a like high quality video and make a call out over the air in a car in Nebraska, because I'm sorry, but we are mostly a rural state, and you're not going to get that kind of connectivity. I'm pretty sure you couldn't get that kind of connectivity anywhere.
I doubt it. And they weren't even in a city in Nebraska. They were in random.
No,
gas
they were
stations.
they were in like podunk cornfields.
And then she gets to the top of the building, and then he like catches her. Oh, this is the dumbest thing.
Yep, that movie's pretty dumb. Her fake southern accent is pretty good though.
It's her accent throughout is pretty good because she starts off with fake British sexy voice and then starts talking like a normal person, and I was like, nicely done. I being able to appreciate the nuances of British people Britishing up their accents in moments. Lost on Americans.
You want to get to this actual book
This
now?
actual book?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
I almost have zero motivation to read this for the record.
Now that you've seen the film, and now that what bits will there be in here that weren't in the film?
I don't know, because I feel like so much of this movie is hasn't happened yet. That the rest of this book is probably going to stick really tightly.
It's
to
going to
the
be
script.
rushing to the thing. But the descriptions of them falling in love have got to be something to behold, right?
Satisfying about it, isn't there? Anybody else get
That's
that?
true. Also, I have kind of a sore throat, and so that's sapping a lot of my motivation. But let's get started. Part 5, Chapter 12.
Part 5?
We're reading from the mass market paperback version, by the way, if you want to read. I don't know if the hardcover version has the right page numbers.
Survive the drive.
We are 47% of the way through for all you Kindle readers.
I think we're a little further than that.
And I was just guessing. Oh yeah, we'd be over 50. Alright, let's do this.
The Super Mustang crossed the George Washington Bridge less than 20 minutes later. We should probably point out where we're at. Like, he just got out of prison and hopped in the car with what's-her-face.
The beginning of the movie.
It's like a half hour in.
Yeah. True.
What was usually a 45-minute drive down from Mount Kisco to Manhattan had been done in half that time by the awesome Shelby GT. Toby was settled in behind the wheel, still buzzing with the twin excitements of driving this car again and being out of the clink. The Mustang had not lost any of its power or its balls. He was casually blowing by any slower traffic he encountered, which was actually all of it. For anything posed any kind of impediment to him, he simply cut around it. I forgot this book is the worst.
You forgot it was
the most
the worst
poorly
written
written
thing.
piece of trash I have ever read.
At least that he wouldn't say he cut through most of the traffic. Actually, all of it.
This was literally life in the fast lane. He'd averaged 120 miles per hour since leaving Mount Kisco and hit 130 as soon as they crossed the border into New Jersey. He'd had little conversation with Julia so far, mostly because she'd been too busy holding on for dear life. But once they'd reached the New Jersey Turnpike, Toby finally turned to her and said, "Okay, so you've never been a right-seater before." She gave him a quick, icy glare. "Don't worry," she replied over the roar of the Mustang's mighty engine. "I'll learn, and if you see something I'm doing wrong, please just point it out." Toby laughed. "Well, for one thing, you're wearing high heels," he said. She just shook her head. "We call them heels these days," she said, "and I have a change of shoes in my overnight bag." I don't understand that line in the movie either. Like, what?
They're not high heels, they're just heels?
Yeah, it's a really stupid line.
This is a line written clearly by 40-year-old men about a young woman trying to talk about fashion to her street racing near boyfriend. It's not going to make sense.
Then I suggest you do something about that, Toby said. Julia reached into her overnight bag, retrieved some more sensible shoes, and changed them with the heels. "There," she said. "Anything else rice-seaters are meant to do?" Toby replied tartly. "How about be quiet?" Julia continued glaring at him. "Like a mouse, you mean?" "Yeah, like a dead mouse," Toby said. She began to say something, but stopped. He stared straight ahead, knowing that one might have cut a little too deep. A chilly silence enveloped the car, and it stayed that way for a long time.
True, she can't
High
handle
above
like
the
a
New
dead
Jersey
mouse.
Turnpike, a Cessna Skyhawk was cruising at 130 miles per hour, closely following the same direction of the highway as it headed south. Benny was at the plane's controls. He clicked his microphone on. "Beauty," he said, "this is Maverick. I've just found you, and you've got a situation a mile ahead." "Roger that," Toby replied via the Mustang's two-way radio. "Copy, a situation a mile ahead." He pushed up to another gear and exploded down the highway. He was soon traveling at 140 miles per hour. "We've got bad traffic up ahead," he said to Julia, finally breaking the silence. "We've got to reroute." She was mystified. "But I don't see any traffic," she said, sitting up in her seat and trying to see the road up ahead. "We don't," Toby said, pointing skyward. "But Benny does. He can see everything. He's our spy in the sky. And I've got to listen to him. Hold on." The two-way radio crackled again. "Stop and go traffic ahead," Benny reported. "I'm looking for an exit for you." Julia was puzzled. "Going to hit traffic on this trip," she said matter-of-factly. "Every city has traffic. Won't that be a big problem?" "Under the best conditions, we need to average just over 80 miles an hour to get to Cali in time," Toby told her. "But every hour we lose, we need to go 160 miles an hour just to make up. So yes, there will be traffic. It's just up to us to avoid it as much as possible." Benny's voice came back on the radio. "Give me $1 on the next exit," he told Toby. "What's $1?" Julia asked. Toby smiled. "You'll see," he said. He quickly upshifted, and a moment later the Mustang was screaming down the breakdown lane, heading towards an off-ramp. At just the right moment, Toby hit the brakes, drifted to the right, and took the exit going 100 miles per hour, a.k.a. $1.
Nice.
$1's in quotes, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Julia's education on the monetary term came with a price. With one hand holding tightly to the dash, the other tightly to the door, she turned a little green at the sudden violent deceleration and then acceleration. Acceleration, by the way, is in italics because this book's terrible.
Great.
The Mustang rocketed up the off-ramp. Benny's voice came back again. "Okay, go hard right for lane 3 in 2. Or lane 3 in 3, 2, 1. This sounded like Greek to Julia, but she was quickly realizing that Toby and Benny were using a precise shorthand language to converse with each other.
Oh,
go hard
numbers.
right for lane 3 is not Greek.
You know, counting down via seconds by 3, 2, 1. That shorthand communication, foreign. No one's done it before.
Each lane of the highway was numbered 1 through 4. All Benny had to do was to say one of those numbers, and Toby would know immediately what lane would be freest of traffic or delay. What fascinated Julia the most, though, was how this language showed a tight bond between the two friends. Traveling in excess of 100 miles per hour, Toby would switch lanes totally on blind faith. Look, she's from the UK. You guys have rally racing there. You have a, pilot in rally racing.
One, we have a pilot, and two, she's not. She buys, she has that moment at the beginning of the art show where she's like, "I know all about cars. Stop assuming I don't." So what the fuck? What the fuck, movie? You've forgotten your own character. Well done.
It was crazy, but admirable too. That's just the whole paragraph.
Okay. Oh god. Yeah, you're right. I had forgotten in the week off how just bad
This book is garbage.
Not even fun garbage. Just pure garbage. Great.
At the end of the off-ramp, Toby burned through the intersection and turned right onto a 3-lane one-way street. Benny's voice crackled over the radio again. "We need you to get clean," he told Toby. "Hard left you in 3, 2, 1. Toby steered the Mustang violently to the left, executing a perfect 180-degree turn. He suddenly rocketed into a car wash. Benny kept talking, soft right through the full-service bay and then go hard right. The Mustang roared out of the car wash and turned right. Suddenly they were going straight into the oncoming traffic. Benny yelled, "Go 3, now!" With a flick of his wrist, Toby zipped the Mustang into the slow lane of the oncoming traffic. They were heading towards a merging intersection. Those cars coming in the opposite direction that saw the Mustang speeding toward them immediately stopped or got out of the way. For his part, Toby weaved around them with remarkable skill. Julie was trying desperately to maintain a poker face throughout all this harrowing maneuvering, but it was hard to do. Everything was going by so fast. Suddenly, the rear of a stopped SUV was looming large in the Mustang's windshield. "You do see the SUV you're about to plow into, right?" she asked Toby as calmly as possible. Instantly, Toby jerked the Mustang into an oncoming lane, just missing the back of the SUV. "You mean that SUV?" he asked her with a smirk. "The white one?" That crisis passed, but another immediately took its place. A large commuter bus was heading right at them. "Maintain speed," Benny calmly advised from above, even though that speed was 100 miles per hour on a very crowded street. The bus flashed its lights madly as the driver went into a sudden, full-blown panic. The Mustang was headed right at it, now topping 105 miles per hour. "And the bus?" Julie asked Toby urgently. "You see that, don't you?" "What's that?" he replied. "The bus," she repeated urgently, her voice rising in tone. "The what?" Toby asked again. Julia finally lost it. "The bus," she yelled. "The bus! The bus!" She braced for impact, but Toby maintained his cool. The front of the bus filled the windshield The driver blew his horn again. Julia screamed loudly, almost drowning out everything else. Then, from above, came Benny's voice. Go, 2, now! Toby swerved right, missing a head-on collision with the oncoming bus by inches, and suddenly that crisis had passed as well. Julia took a deep breath and tried hard to regain her composure. Toby glanced over at her. You mean that bus, he asked her. But Julia refused to take the bait. She put her poker face back on and just stared straight ahead. Then, from Benny again, hard left in 3. Toby downshifted, resulting in a violent deceleration. At the same moment, Julia's cell phone began ringing, but it was somewhere behind the front seat. She undid her seatbelt, turned around, knelt on the seat, and began searching for it. It was ringing urgently, yet she couldn't find it. Shit, where is it? She cursed. From Benny. 2, 1, now! The Mustang ran across 3 lanes of traffic in less than 3 seconds, blowing through a red light for good measure. Give me $1 for a quarter, Benny then requested from on high, leaving the traffic behind. The Mustang went back to accelerating. It was soon tearing down a 1-lane rural road, but Julia was still upset. You and Benny have this cheeky language, she said, still facing backward and kneeling on the seat. You think it's adorable, do you? Well, it's not. If I'm going to help you, I need to know what you're saying. She launched into a near-perfect imitation of their strong upstate New York, thoroughly American accents. Give me $1, she said. Roger that, soft right. 3, 2, 1. You need to speak English, Toby. But at that moment, still traveling at 110 miles per hour, the Mustang hit a huge speed bump. The supercar went airborne, all 4 tires leaving the ground. Julia went airborne as well, ass over tea kettle, landing in a heap on the front seat floor. Toby couldn't resist. He called up to Benny and asked, Are you having fun up there yet? Roy Rogers was Benny's reply. Hard left in 10. Just as Julia was crawling back into her seat, Toby downshifted and slid through an oncoming intersection. Amid a gaggle of traffic, he also managed to turn hard left. Benny radioed down, on-ramp in 3, 2, 1. Toby hit the ramp, topping 112 miles per hour. Radio crackled again. Okay, beauty, Benny said. Finally, you're all clear from here. Julia's eyes were firing daggers at Toby by this point, but he stayed quiet as if nothing unusual had happened. I understand that driving fast is going to be necessary, she yelled at him, but driving like some mental patient just to scare me out of the car is not going to work. Are you sure about that? Toby asked her. Well, if that's what you thought, she said to him angrily, then whatever you think of me, I'm sure it's wrong. Toby just stared straight ahead. Then educate me, he finally told her. And so she did. So you think, she began, that just because I make a living buying cars designed to triple the speed limit and drive a Maserati, and oh, by the way, I am an awesome driver, that you can condescend to me? If you think that, then I guarantee you this will be the longest 44 hours and 11 minutes of your life. Toby almost laughed at her. He'd spent many months in solitary confinement. He knew well what a long 44 hours could feel like. But then he thought about it for a moment and finally said, One request? You talk less. I know, she replied, like a dead mouse. She put on a high, mouse-like voice and continued, Squeak, squeak, here I am. I'm a mouse. I'm dying. I'm dead. I'm a dead mouse and I'm not talking now. Right? Like that? Toby couldn't help it. He smiled a bit. She is very cute, he thought. Now that the atmosphere inside the Mustang was eased a bit, Toby laid on the gas and headed for the western horizon, still traveling in excess of $1.
I hate what my life has become.
The worst part is, by and large, this book has followed the action scenes like to a T, and this is the first one that they deviated. They didn't have that spot where he jumped over all the cars, and instead they have her take a bump, and that's weird.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that it deviated here.
I think they must have cut that from the film because when they did the big jump later, wouldn't that undercut that? Those are the discussions you would have directing the Need for Speed movie, I assume.
Oh, I know. I wonder if this book was based on storyboards because the action scenes are really actually beat for beat from the movie.
I would assume so. Like the storyboard and action scenes must be one of the first things you do, especially because they have live action cars.
Yeah. Well, that was the end of the chapter.
Oh, there's beautiful. I assume she was the dead mouse stuff in the movie. I'm sure.
No, absolutely not.
No, okay. I was going to say. I can't remember what they did say, but it was everything they said there except the dead mouse stuff.
Yeah, it was because that's stupid. Why would you do that?
God, I don't know. It's clearly basing off a first draft of this screenplay, because if that was in any later than the first draft, then.
Chapter 13. The restaurant was one of the most expensive in the country.
It wasn't an Applebee's.
In one corner, at the best table in the place, were Dino, Anita, and a man and wife. The man was a multimillionaire, and even better for Dino, he was an investor. This meant he was a mark for Dino, a person for whom he could siphon money A sucker. This is also the most useless scene in the movie, because
What does it
this
even
is
set
terrible.
up? The stuff with
that I think it just set up that Anita like didn't know what he was doing and maybe didn't trust him fully, but it's done in the most haphazard, like unhanded way.
As far as mostly to set up the fact that he has to win and Toby has to win, and you want this big head-to-head thing, except he's not a credible villain in any way. So it's just the most half-assed scene in the whole film. God, right, let's get through this chapter then.
That was the underlying reason for the dinner. Doing her part as Dino's arm candy was Anita, who looked stunning. Believe me, the investor was telling Dino, I'm not trying to be an asshole. You don't have to try that hard, his wife interjected in a perfect deadpan, sipping her drink. It's just that the idea of a guy called Monarch, the investor went on a bit uncertain, and that he hosts a secret race and all, well, it's just a bit hard to believe. Dino nodded sympathetically. He's supposedly from a blue blood wealthy family, he said. Real old money, people who made their fortunes during the Industrial Revolution. I love that this line exists because it's the dumbest. His name's actually Monarch Rockefeller, his grandson.
He is actually a monarch.
Yep. And no one knows who he is, the investor asked. Dino shook his head. No one, he said.
The finish line is his house.
Okay, because they never actually say that, but I assumed that and thought it was funny. And I'm glad you assumed the same thing.
Well, because I didn't necessarily assume that until he gets arrested too, from the same place that Toby. And I'm like, what? He looks out the window and Toby's. It's so ridiculous. Please, I hope this explains it. Maybe this book is the untold story.
Dino shook his head. No one, he said. Well, Dino does, Anita said, suddenly interrupting. Dino looked at her. He was both surprised and amused. Oh, I do? He asked. It's just a feeling I get, she said. You calling me a liar? Dino asked her. Sometimes I think you're not telling the whole story, she replied. Dino waved her quiet and turned back to his dinner companions. That's not in the movie. That's weird. Maybe we are going to get some more Monarch. That'd be alright.
That'd be pretty good. Wouldn't there be the subplot about her finding out about Little Pete?
Yeah.
Poor Little Pete.
We'll get to that when Monarch starts giving us the plot because nobody cares. Monarch has sponsored Formula One race teams, Dino told them, always under other names. But that I know about him for sure. Really an underground type, the man's wife said. With a bad ticker, Dino said. Word is, he used to drive in big races, but he could drop dead at any moment, so he quit the hands-on racing business. Dino knew the mark was warming up, though it might have been the alcohol. I'd love to see his podcast, he said. Monarch's site is private, and he had told him it's by invite only. Dino took a long swig of his scotch. Wonder when she'll shut up, he thought. What's the big prize for the on, the Mark asked. Big rewards come with big risks, Dino answered. Any car that's in the race and loses automatically belongs to the winner. I won it last year and left with more than $6 million in cars, and one of them was a new Pagani. Okay, let's stop for a second. Two things. One, Monarch's website is like from a future internet, where you can do just about anything and uploads are instantaneous.
Yep. Which is great.
Which was always the best. Second, so the De Leon isn't actually a money prize. It's whatever cars compete in the race. If the winner gets them all.
And
but
all the cars.
The race destroys every single car. And I'm pretty sure it's not just a one-off. I bet that happens every year.
Yeah, and not just like kind of knocks them out so they'll be slightly less valuable.
Flaming fireballs through the air, hitting rocks.
And there wasn't a line to show that just because Toby's in it this year, it's especially horrific. No, this is how it always is. This is just the De Leon.
So you don't actually win anything for the De Leon.
It's the dumbest thing.
Sounds like a good day's work, the man said with a laugh.
Haha.
Yes, it was, Dino replied, turning mock serious. But listen, I'm not trying to push you. However, I've got another interested party. Now, I'm not 100% sure about them. You know that feeling? I know it well, the Mark replied, and I like what I saw in your garage. That's quite a dealership you got going there. The problem I have is you haven't shown a hard profit yet, at least not in cash. Dino shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Frustration was starting to show around the edges of his face. Let me be blunt, he asked. What do I have to do to get a real commitment from you? I'll be blunt right back, the investor replied. What do you consider a real commitment? $5 million, Dino asked. With that kind of money, we can be one of the biggest high-end car dealerships in the country. Win the secret De Leon again, then, the investor said. You mean, if I win this year's De Leon, Dino said, you're in for $5 million? The man reached over the table and shook Dino's hand. Yes, I am, he said. Can I get that in writing, Dino asked him. Just send me a contract, the man replied. The couple was gone a few minutes later. Once they were out of sight, Dino collapsed back into his chair. He sucked down what was left of his scotch and then tossed the glass back on the table. I need that guy, he said worriedly. I need that deal. Anita was surprised to hear this. What do you mean, she asked him. You told me your dealership made a big profit last year. It's paper profit, Dino told her dismissively. I need some fresh cash to survive. He looked away from her again, his features turning dark. Anita continued staring at him, though. At this point, she didn't really know what to think.
Is that the end?
I'm glad you explained why Dino has been like a one-time winner of the De Leon and like a successful like IndyCar driver and running a giant dealership and still needs this money, because the movie sure didn't.
I thought in the movie he was just doing it to be a dick. I wasn't aware what was. I just thought, oh, he's the villain. He's doing villainous things, I guess. That's all the movie gives you.
Though how he managed to like win the De Leon and still be in such dire straits is baffling to me. Obviously, Dino is into the drugs.
Because he won all the cars and they were wrecks.
That's true.
It was like, this is gonna save
I've
me.
got a shop, I can just fix them up and drop like millions of dollars into that.
But no, because he needs fucking Toby's shop to fix it. What is going on? This is
Chapter
the worst.
14. Night had fallen on Ohio. The Shelby Mustang roared down the highway, relentlessly heading west, traveling more than twice the speed of those few cars and trucks sharing the road with it. Toby was driving in silence at 120 miles per hour. Julia was asleep. It was almost midnight. He punched a number into his iPhone. Okay, stop again, because we're just going to talk about the movie while this stuff happened.
Yep.
You notice that when he gets out of jail, he has a brand new iPhone 5, despite the fact he's been in jail for 2 years. But in that
Shit.
phone is little Pete's number. Which means he got the phone after he got out of jail, which is fine, but then he also put in little Pete's number after he got out of jail.
Or it
which
means-
is pretty morbid.
Or it means that it's actually taking place in 2016, hence future internet.
No.
It makes... No, you
That's not as funny as Toby being a weird psychopath and putting in Pete's number after he's been dead for several years.
I want to talk one quickly about the changes made to the Piers Morgan joke in the movie. Which,
I appreciate that, like, she just reacts by looking like he slapped her.
oh, yeah, but in the movie it sounds like, in the book, it's written like he makes a joke about Piers Morgan being the worst. In the film it plays like he's that much of an idiot that he's into Piers Morgan.
Yep, that's the best part.
Like, Lil Pete, you're the worst character ever created. Well done.
You mean this, like, 14-year-old race car driver? Yes.
He had a vision, you know.
Joe Peck's voice came on immediately. Checking in, he said. Mile marker 417, Tubby replied. We're on schedule. Joe Peck was driving alone in a vehicle they called the Beast. It was the team support truck. Big and boxy, it looked like a combination tow truck and delivery van. It was full of spare tires, parts, water, batteries, oil, and transmission fluid. Everything they might need during the high-speed cross-country dash. But it also carried the most important thing of all, fuel. It's a miracle that we're still on schedule, Joe told Toby. Maybe we have an outside chance of actually pulling this thing off. I was just sitting here thinking, Pete would have loved this trip.
Oh,
And
there
Toby
we go.
right in the gut. Yeah, he replied sadly. He loved the impossible. Dino should be in jail for what he did to Pete that day, Joe said. I'll never forget what I saw when I found him, Toby replied. I still have nightmares about it. He wrecked him, Toby, Joe went on. He picked him up and flipped him. Let me ask you, what if you get behind Dino's back bumper? What if you end up back there in the race? What will you do? I'm glad that they set this up, because the movie sure didn't, again.
Except it was obvious that it couldn't end another way.
I guess. I felt it was really ham-fisted to just drop this in.
It was really ham-fisted, but then I knew from the second they said a thing just earlier about him being like I was thinking like, how did this go? Because it's not just going to be him beating him; it's got to harken back to that. And as soon as he got the car, I was like, well, clearly, no other way this goes.
Toby thought deeply about what Joe was asking him, and not for the first time. But he didn't reply. His silence said it all. That's what I thought, Joe said. Okay, brother, I'll see you in Detroit. Beast out. I like that when I saw brother, I just put extra gravel in my voice. I've been watching too much wrestling.
The gravel is implied, I feel.
Still mulling over his conversation with Joe, Toby glanced at Julia. He expected to find her still sleeping, but he got a surprise. She was wide awake and looking right at him. "I'm sorry about Pete," she told him. "I only met him those 2 times. Remember, at the exhibit hall in Manhattan, and then the next day at the Shepperton racetrack." I'm glad that they had that exhibit show in there, and it was just as dumb as described.
Yeah, it really was. And yet they cut out the entire montage of them making the car.
Yep.
We assumed.
Amazing the things that they thought to cut out. Like, just best.
Like, oh, it's so stupid. Okay, let's carry on.
But I could tell what kind of person he was just by his smile.
The
He reminded
worst.
me of my own little brother, always in motion, always smiling. A real pest he is, but I love him to death. Dino just left him there, Toby said angrily. That's what I can't forgive.
Okay,
the
yeah,
trial, the prison, everything that happened.
That was it. It was him keep going
Okay,
on about
none
how
of
he
that would
left
even
him.
matter to me.
The fact that he
Okay.
kept going on about
None of
how
that would
he
even
left
matter to me if Pete was still alive. I realize what we do isn't pretty, but there's one unwritten rule. You always go back. That was not in the movie. That's not an unwritten rule.
He didn't say that, but he did keep saying about how we left him there.
I
It was
know.
basically the Thunderbirds movie, is what I kept
never
thinking
seen
of.
that.
Well, they keep going on about how we don't leave anyone behind, and then he has to save the hood at the end.
You can
Spoilers.
take the shortest
Okay.
route, or you can take the meanest. Taylor,
That's what this is really all about, Julia asked him, to somehow avenge Pete's death. Toby didn't reply. He didn't want to. He just fixed his gaze back on the road and kept driving. 15. It was Friday, nearly 8 a.m., and heavy morning traffic was clogging the streets of downtown Detroit as usual.
Oh, here we go.
Inside one of the many buildings in the downtown area, one office was particularly busy. Phones were ringing. Mail was being delivered to people working in endless rows of cubicles. This fourth-floor office was full of hustle and bustle. Finn was sitting in one of these cubicles, feeling not unlike a rat in a maze. He was dressed in business attire, a far cry from his grease monkey days back at Marshall Motors. His iPhone suddenly rang. He looked at the caller's number, shook his head, and let it go to voicemail. But then the iPhone rang again. This time he picked it up. It was Joe Peck. "We've already had this conversation," Finn told him plainly. "Just go to the window," Joe replied. "No," Finn asked. "Why would I do that?" "Just go, now," Joe insisted. Finn just shook his head again. Then he got up and walked to the window. He looked down to the street below and was surprised to see the Shelby Mustang idling loudly on the curb right outside his office building. Even in a place called Motor City, the car stood out, a stark contrast to the fuel-efficient home-by-5 cars making up most of the morning rush hour around it. Nobody has called Detroit Motor